Welcome to English and Grow. Today we are going to dive into a grisly topic, and that's punishment. Let's go for it. So, do you know these words? Do you know what a pillory is? Do you know that a wheel might be spoked? What about a scaffold? What about mutilation or gallows? Let's do this. So, in this slide, we can see the picture of an executioner. I reckon he is holding an axe and he's about to execute someone on a scaffold. So, scaffold is a wooden structure, something like a stage, so all the public could gather and see the punishment of the convicted person. In this slide, we see modern gallows. I believe this is not something that they would use in the Middle Ages, but it is very similar to that. So on this scaffold, the convicted person or the victim, depends how we say it, would receive his or her capital punishment, and that could be also referred to as death penalty. Now, in the Middle Ages, the punishment was really grisly. It was not just about being beheaded. You could be, as a victim or as a convicted person, you could be first drawn to the scaffold by a horse. There, you would be first maybe quartered, maybe first you would be disemboweled, you might be also castrated, and only later on beheaded. So, if you were drawn by the horse, that means that your feet would be tied by a rope to a horse, and in this way, you would be transported to the gallows. Quartered, I'm sure you know what that means. And you could actually also be quartered by four horses, which is a really a grisly means of punishment. Disemboweled, it means that the guts would be ripped open and castrated. I believe that doesn't need to be explained. Let's take a look at this one. This is a pillory, and that's a spot in a public again public square, I would say, so that everyone would see the shame of the person, so everyone could actually come even nearer to the convicted person and express his or her feelings. I believe this was part of public punishment, public humiliation, public shame. And that's actually, let's move on to a modern means of punishment. So, in modern times, they came up with this instrument, and it was a guillotine. Again, the result is the same, but maybe it was kind of, it sounds hilarious, but it was more human to actually just be beheaded as a victim, uh, that it would be kind of short. And let's move on to this one. Let's get back to medieval torture. So you could also be handcuffed to a table like this, where torture might be performed. You might be burned. You might be also stretched on a rake. You might be also braided into a spoked wheel. So this slide shows what a spoked wheel is. Braided, I'm sure you know the hairstyle, but the victim needn't be just braided in to the wheel. The wheel could be dropped onto the convicted person. It would be first dropped onto the shins, and the executioner would proceed from the legs upwards, and the death was really painfully slow, and the victim would suffer agonizing mutilation. What about this one? This is a mask of shame, and something similar would be Scold's bridle. Bridle is what horses have to carry in their mouths. And this one in the picture is a mask of shame. You can see more information in the links which are in the slide. And the mask of shame would be used to punish, for example, someone who would get drunk really miserably. So they would use a mask in the shape of a pig, which is what you can see here. Scold's bridle would also be used to punish gossips, for example. It might have some parts with spikes that would be inserted into the mouth of the victim, and that person would have to walk together with the executioner in public spaces for hours or even for the whole day, so that again everyone would witness the misery and the punishment of the person. Here we see an instrument with a lot of spikes. I believe that's the Spanish boot. And one more time, we can revise that the victim or the convicted person would be drawn to the scaffold, and the shoes with spikes or the disemboweling would be two types of the most grisly punishment, I believe. Now, here we see a heretic. Heretic is a person who disagrees with the church. It's a person who has different, usually highly critical opinions of what the church should do and shouldn't do. And in my country, which is the Czech Republic, we have one, I would say, a hero, a freedom fighter. That's Jan Hus, and he was burned at a stake for telling the truth, for revealing the hypocrisy of the church back then. For me, he's a true hero. Now, let's move on to modern times. So, in concentration camps, people would be kept behind barbed wires, which is what you can see in this picture. Again, spikes are used to prevent the escape of the people. People who are in prisons, they might be also put into special cells, which is called a solitary confinement, which means they are punished also by being alone for long days or weeks, maybe even years. And here we continue with modern punishments connected to driving. So if you exceed the speed limit, you might be punished by getting a fine, but you might also be punished by having your driving license suspended. It means you cannot drive. I mean, you can, but you don't have the license, and that means you can be punished again. This one is connected with mortgage, and that means if you don't manage to pay your mortgage, you might experience sequestration. That means you lose the ownership rights to your property. The same is foreclosure. It might be also connected with tax office, which means that this office finds out that you haven't paid some tax, and that means if you are not able to pay the tax anymore, again, you might be punished by losing your property. The last slide is connected with slavery. Believe it or not, but still, there are people who live a life of modern slavery. They have to work in sweatshops. That means they are like slaves. They receive almost no money. They have little food. They have zero freedom. And that's called forced labor. And it's also children who have to suffer this fate. And that's called child labor. So, what have you learned? Do you know what a mask of shame is? Do you know Scold's bridle? Do you know solitary confinement? Do you know who a heretic is? Do you know that the heretics were burnt at a stake? This is it. If you like my content, please like, comment, and subscribe. And most importantly, support me on my Patreon, English and Grow, for more videos, Zoom lessons, and language coaching.